Hi, I'm Katie, and welcome to Hey It Gets Better. This is the podcast where I chat to people about the ups and downs of their lives and how they got to where they are now. Life can be pretty tough sometimes, there's no escaping that fact. But at Hey It Gets Better, we're all about talking about the journey. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and remember, hey, it gets better. Hi everyone, welcome to Hey It Gets Better, and today I'm joined by Lucy Haslam, who is the founder of the most gorgeous business I've ever seen. It's curated children's toys and clothes and decor that focus on the design aspect of it, and it's called Acorn and Pip. Welcome to Hey It Gets Better, Lucy.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely no worries at all. So I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. And I just think what you've built with Acorn and Pip is brilliant. You've started, I was reading about it and found that, you were writing that you started it in your kitchen and now it's a 6-figure business, which is brilliant.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. But yeah, this is our 5th year in business now, so it feels like quite a milestone for me. And I don't often give myself a lot of time to kind of look back and reflect at the journey that we've been on since starting Acorn and Pip. But when I do look back and I think, started it like most people start their businesses, at their kitchen table or wherever, and then to look at how far we've come and the position we're in now is quite something.
Yeah, I think your journey is one that I can't wait to dive a little bit more into and find out really how you got to where you are now, as you were originally a teacher, weren't you?
Yeah, so I finished uni. I don't actually dare to think of what year it was, but I finished uni and we were in the recession, the global recession, and I actually went into recruitment as a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to me needing to find a job. And it took me quite a few years just to work out where my skills were best placed and what I actually wanted to do. And so I looked into teaching. So I did languages at university in Manchester, and I loved kids. I loved teaching. I loved being around people, and it seemed like a really good avenue for me to go into. So I started out as secondary school teacher for French and Spanish, and I did my master's in education, and I just loved all aspects of it. And then I had my daughter. So she's turning 6 this year. And when I had her, I found kind of a new side of me, which I didn't really know existed. There was never really that release available to me before having children. So that release to me was quite a creative release. It was I kind of found myself being able to be quite childish, which I never really was before. But then, suddenly having a child to look after and playing all these games and playing with toys and things like that, I just found it really fun. And I'd never really thought of owning my own business or doing my own thing. But then whilst I was on maternity leave, I don't really know how the idea came to me as such, but I started to think about what I could do, what project I could do to keep myself busy. Although, I had a child, so she was a baby, so that was keeping me busy. But there's something about motherhood that can be quite monotonous and quite isolating. So I definitely knew I needed something else to keep my brain busy. And we'd been gifted some lovely presents from friends and family. And there was one present that really stood out to me, and I was reading about this product on the little card that came with it, and it was about how it was a knitted dinosaur, and about how the dinosaur, the supply chain, the money raised from the sale of the dinosaurs goes to helping empower women in rural Bangladesh to learn how to crochet and knit. So it gives them jobs, and the whole story of this product really fascinated me. And then I started looking around at all the other toys that we had, and not just toys, but like clothes and everything else. And it kind of dawned on me how there was a real, well, it really excited me, the fact that you could kind of give back through products. And so I actually thought about selling them myself. So then I got a stall at an artisan market in South Manchester called Altrincham Market, which is an amazing, amazing place. And so I literally just set up a little business, thinking it would just see me through maternity leave. I could have a great time, like buying and selling like toys and clothes and things like that. And then it came back to me going back to school, and it just felt like two worlds just didn't quite sit together, like me wanting to do my own thing and then being a teacher. And everyone knows that being a teacher it's a really hard job. It's all consuming, and it's quite difficult. So I applied to go part-time. That was rejected, and I just couldn't see how I could continue being a mum, wanting to carry on with this new business that I'd started and be a teacher. So it was kind of crunch time in my head, and that's when I decided, right, I'm just going to make a go of this. And then kind of fast forward 5 years, that's where Acorn and Pip is now, in a very different position, but it's grown from that to this.
I think that's a really great story about how you didn't really know what it was going to become, but you took the chance. And one thing I really get from hearing your story is that if you don't have a go at something, you'll never know. And especially if sometimes you might have to give something up, but you don't know the possibilities of what you could get until you try.
Yeah, like I've always been quite I've never been risk averse, and risk throughout my life has definitely looked different. So, you know, like from choosing what university you want to go to, that's kind of a risk. You know, I'd never actually been to Manchester before I applied to go there and live there for 5 years. So that was kind of a risk for me, but I just kind of took it as, yeah, I know it's going to be fine. And I tend to have that kind of mentality that if I want something, it's just worth going for. The worst that can happen is you can fail. But the best thing that can happen is kind of limitless possibilities. Now that's quite like a bold way to live, and I wouldn't say it's for everyone, but in looking at it in kind of a different way, you can break that down so it doesn't have to be these massive life altering risks that you take. But there was a way, like I saw starting up Acorn and Pip, in the early days, it was a risk. There was only a small financial startup cost, because it was literally just a market stall that was provided and some stock, so it really wasn't very much. But there was a small financial risk, I suppose. But it's more, I was looking at it more like, you know, if this works out, then it could be really cool. Now, kind of fast forwarding 5 years, my risks are much greater. I have 3 children now. I have a shop, I have a warehouse, I have another business. So my risks are much greater, but I still like to think, there's that quote, I probably won't be able to remember it now, but it's like, what does it say? If you don't jump, you don't know you can fly, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of always in my head, like, unless you just take that step, who knows what could be waiting for you. Yes, you might fall, but then also you might fly. So I do have that kind of thought in my head that possibilities and risks are worth taking, because you don't necessarily know where they might take you, and they might take you somewhere incredible.
That's really like motivational. It's like making me want to really go and like properly work hard after this call. But it's so good to hear, and I feel like when, especially now, growing up, being in my early 20s, you're sort of taught there is like a path you can take without risk, where, you know, you go to university, you get a job, you work in that job, and it's sort of presented as being a sort of risk-free way of living, which nothing is risk-free. And it's also not as fulfilling sometimes, unless you find the right job. it's definitely like a mixed bag. So hearing that idea that, you know, taking risks and like what could actually become of it, it's really quite inspiring.
Well, I think there's risk in everything, isn't there? Like, even like you say, if you follow that kind of really clear set out path, which I don't actually think exists anymore, but you know, you leave university, you get a job, you stay there 5 years, you have a lovely little pay coming into your bank every month. You know, that's great, but you will encounter risk elsewhere. You know, it might be that you get approached to join another company. That kind of stirs up those feelings of what if. And if you have those feelings of what if, they're the ones you have to explore. But coming back to my point, I just don't think there is that kind of clear path anymore of, you know, get job A, stay there happily for 5 years, get job B, nice step up, that kind of thing. I've yet to see it, and especially now with the pandemic and exams being cancelled or moved, and universities, the landscape is just so different to how it was like 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. I think people are really going to have to start to challenge what they've previously been taught from their teachers or parents or peers about what this kind of ideal safe path looks like. They're going to have to challenge that and just ask themselves, what is it that they think their life could look like, and how are they going to get there? The path will not be straight. It will be up, down, round, you know, huge highs, huge lows. But that is actually normal. And I think that's what people need to hear right now, is that the ups and downs and roundabouts are normal. This kind of clear path that perhaps has been taught to them, just, I think it's an unrealistic expectation.
I couldn't agree more. It just hasn't been the way I've managed to get work at all. And I think a lot of people, like a lot of my friends who are graduates, and they're doing all the right things, they're doing their CVs, they're working hard for interviews, and they're not getting the jobs, and it's a difficult time. But the way I've found that the best success has come to people who've thought outside the box, tried something new, a new way of doing things. And I think that needs to be encouraged now, definitely, to help
Yeah,
people.
it does need to be encouraged, and I think there just needs to be more conversation around it and more support perhaps for people that, like you say, like they've come out of university, they've written absolutely killer CV, and they're like, right, I have this because I've been taught all my life that you get a 2-1 or you get a 2-2 or a first, and then you write this incredible CV. You know, I've done loads of volunteering or whatever in the past, and my CV is going to look amazing. And then all of a sudden they go into the job market. Well, you know, so are millions of others going to the job market, and they're just not being noticed. So it's about, right, I've got to now suddenly do things that I have not been taught yet. But those things are really exciting, like exactly what you've done, Katie. Like you've just said exactly what your path has looked like up to this point, and you've really had to kind of use the phrase of 2020, but you really had to pivot and like think, right, what else can I do? Where do my skills take me? And that's where the excitement comes in. So we shouldn't really see it as, oh God, what am I going to do? It's like, right, what can I do now? I'm in control here. This is my life. What can I go and do? And there's a lot to be excited about by that, I think.
Yeah, I really think that I'm glad you mentioned like the excitement of it, because when things don't go the way you have it set out in your head, or like, you know, when you have a 5-year plan and you're like 10 years behind, it can it can be like really tempting to go like panic and stress about it. But I think it's important to realize that with every door that shuts or every twist and turn in the road, there's an element of excitement because, like you said, you are in control. And there, you know, if you pivot and you find yourself going to a completely new destination, that can be really exciting.
Yeah, it can be. You learn a lot about yourself. Like, I know that there's been so many times in my business kind of story so far that, you know, I've had knockbacks or I've made mistakes, and you can kind of retrospectively, you can say, right, I'm adding that to my story. At the time you're living it, you're like, oh my gosh, this could make or well, it could break me. But it's really important to kind of see those things as well, those challenges as parts of your story that you can tell in time to come, that you overcame. And I just hope that people starting out now or finding a twist and turn in their story, that they're able to work out how they can use it to their advantage, because it happens to everyone. I mean, success or growth is not linear, and it's definitely what we've been taught it is. You know, you jump up that ladder, but actually, I mean, you fall down the ladder just as much as you jump up. So
I actually remember when I did lose my job, I messaged people in my network, and I actually messaged Kieran, who'd also been on the podcast, and he is working at a marketing agency, and he was like, and I was like, oh well, at least it's a bit more of my Hey It Gets Better story. And that's like one way to think of it. I just think it's another chapter in my memoirs to make it a bit more interesting.
Yeah, and you know what? When you're at school and university and things like that, you don't learn how to lose a job. I remember I didn't lose a job, but I was thinking of leaving, and I found it really hard to like work out how to be a grown up and how to like quit a job, and you just don't get taught that, do you? So to have gone to uni and then like lose a job because of the pandemic or whatever situation is really hard, and it's such a massive a learning curve, and probably not one that you wish to have gone through so quickly. But I mean, it's definitely something you need to learn how to do, to either decline a job or lose a job or make different choices. So yeah, welcome to the adult world.
Thanks. I think that's one of the things as well, is like growing up it's so weird. I didn't expect it to be this odd, and I think it's obviously the weirdness has kind of been exacerbated by the global pandemic, but you kind of have to think a lot as well about yourself and you know what do you want to be like working for, how much money do you want, what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning. There's so much kind of self-reflection that goes into growing up that no one prepares you for.
No, and it can be exhausting, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. I've had days where I'm like, I'm so tired of growing. I just want to like sit and watch Netflix, please.
And you can still sit and watch Netflix, but yeah, the reflection and the just taking time out to sit and think, right, what do I want to do? And if you don't know, that's absolutely fine, but what can you do for now that will just help you to be? And we can't forget that the time we're in, this pandemic, it's utterly exhausting, and it's always worth giving yourself a break, like whether that's mentally or, I mean, we can't all take a break financially, like unless you're really privileged. Like I know for us, when the pandemic hit, the first thing we thought about was, you know, how are we going to do this financially? Is our family going to be safe? Are our staff going to be safe? Like, how are we going to work this out? And it's all these huge things that you need to consider. But like when we went into the first lockdown, and I feel like the first lockdown, it was such an unknown quantity to everybody. Now I thought, you know, we're kind of pros at the country locking down, but you do have these huge considerations, and finances are number one. Like we have 3 children, and we have a house, and we have the business to keep going, so we have to work really hard at keeping it all together. But that's something that we've learned to do more so over this year, and I say we because it's me and my husband that run the business now. And I think when you're looking at your life or you're looking at your career choices, it does have to come down to the things that really matter. So for us, it is putting food on the table and keeping the business going. And it's not shying away from the fact that if money is important to you, or money is not even important as in, you know, oh, I want to be a millionaire, but important as in I need X amount to keep me going every month. I think you need to be really honest with yourself about that. sometimes it can be bandied around that like money or wealth is a dirty word, or people can be quite embarrassed about it. But I think knowing where you are financially and knowing where you need to get to or want to get to is a really important part of kind of staying on track and working out how your plans can feed into a career choice, and just making it work for you and your family if you have one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think learning about what you need to really be bringing in each month, and kind of not being afraid to make a profit, make what you need and enough to save for your house deposit or X and Y, because it, if you're working hard and you're putting a lot in, you deserve the success you're getting. And I think sometimes you have to let yourself have it, and sometimes you and your mentality can be that roadblock.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm a big well, not even a big fan. This is just kind of how I run things. I always reverse engineer every plan or project that we have. So we always look at the end, how it's going to look at the end, and then work back from that. So if we know that we need to earn X amount of money to make it work, then we'll start at that sum and work backwards. Or I do it for everything. So it's like, right, we need to go on holiday. Not we need to, but we'd like to go on holiday in the summer. How much is that going to cost? Right? How much? Break that down per week. Okay, this is how much I need to earn each week to be able to afford that holiday. But more importantly, that's how we do it for the business. So we might look at how many customers we need to reach a sum in order to employ more staff, or however it works. But knowing where you are in terms of your career, but then drilling down on that and knowing the numbers as well. Numbers are very important.
That's really refreshing to hear, and something that I'm definitely gonna be taking on board. You'll see me like this evening, I'll be there with my notebook and a calculator just working it all out. But it's something I think that's really helpful to consider, especially, at in your early 20s. A lot of these lessons that have come across in Hey It Gets Better are things people have learned later in their lives that I think are still really helpful and relevant to people early in their lives.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they say the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time is now. And I think that's it. Like I was never savvy with like numbers or finance and tax or anything like that. And it's something that I have just had to grow up and learn about. But if I'd have learned it 10, 20 years ago, my god, I'd be amazing right now. But I think with like things like finance, like pensions and tax and it's worth knowing what your end goal is, breaking it down, and then looking at how much you need to put away each week. So if you're looking at, right, I want to buy a house in 15 years time, 10 years time, whatever, break it down, look at how much you need to put away each week over that time, and it just kind of makes it doable. So if you think in 5 years, oh yeah, I'd like to buy a house, oh I wish I'd started saving 5 years ago, well the next best time is now, isn't it? Start saving, or start putting money away for a project. Or if you want to grow your business, look at what it takes to grow your business. It doesn't have to be financial. So we look at our 5-year plan and we break it down month by month, so we know by the time 5 years has come, we've done 5 years worth of work to get to our 5-year plan. So it's not, you don't just arrive in 5 years and say, oh, I was supposed to have reached target X, Y, and Z. Why am I not there yet? It's because you haven't broken it down. You've not been working towards it cumulatively over that period. So I don't really know what my point is here, but I think it's just the whole point of kind of looking towards your future and seeing what you want to do is start thinking about it now, break it down now, and work towards it. Because if you don't have a goal, then what are you actually working towards?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think it's good that you hear a lot about, set goals, but actually working out the work that needs to go into it is really important, because you might say, I want X to happen, but if you don't know what you need to do to get to X, then it won't happen. So I think that's so important that you break it down, and it sounds like your process is really smooth and something that can be applied to quite a few aspects of your life.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It shouldn't. I mean, I look at it very much from a business point of view, but that's not to say that it can't be applied. In personal life or relationships even. And there's so many ways. I think just generally, if you have a goal and you know how you're going to get there, then it will lead you there. So like we do it a lot with our kids, for example. So if we know that our little girl's learning to read at the moment, so we know that if we do like little bits every day, she's going to end up reading at the end of the year or whatever it is. But that's just an example of you can roll it out any which way in your life. So if you've just left uni or you're in uni now and you're thinking, right, I know when I leave I want to be running a business on my own, or I want to be employed by this company. If you've got your eyes on them, then start making moves now. The future is the future, but you may as well start now, because you never know when you're going to need to hop into that action plan.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this makes me kind of think about my own experience of uni, when I actually started Hey It Gets Better in like September of my final year. I didn't produce any episodes. It was mostly me just emailing people like, would you be interested in this, and making contacts. But having done that groundwork, when I graduated and I had enough time to produce the episodes and things like that, like it was really easy. It was ready to go. And I think doing that during uni, making those connections without having massive amount of pressure on myself to produce an episode every 2 weeks and things like that was super helpful. And then when it came to looking for recommendations for jobs or career advice, that helped as well.
Yeah, for sure. Start now whilst, especially if you have an idea. Ideas are absolutely golden. If you have an idea, sit and think about, could this be the start of something? And take time to dream as well. Think about what it could look like. I remember when I started Acorn and Pip on the market stall, and in the winter it would just be so cold. We would be out, and it was always January and February, where there was hardly any people visiting the market really. And my God, it was just so cold, like minus degrees. And I used to just stand there like frozen to the spot, just thinking, one day I won't be stood here. One day I'm going to be in a nice warm shop, and we're going to have a cafe in our shop, and it's going to be full to the brim of people drinking coffee and buying all this lovely stuff. And I used to just stand there and dream. And then when we moved so we used to live in Manchester, we moved over to West Yorkshire 3 years ago. And it was when the beast from the east was here. So it was like thick snow outside, and we'd only just moved to this tiny little village in West Yorkshire, and we walked down to the shops near us in the little village, and there was just this huge old shop that was closed down. It had like paper over the windows, and I just stood there and I was like, oh my God, that's the shop I've been dreaming about all those years. Not all those years, I was on the market for like 3.5 years, but I was like, that's the one, that's what I've been dreaming about. And I could just see Acorn and Pip over the door and these huge windows, and I was just thinking of how I could bring them to life with all these toys. And the dream was always to have a cafe in store, which we do. Obviously it's closed now because of COVID, but I felt like all those years of dreaming, and they weren't like fruitless dreams. They were like, I am going to dream of having this shop, and I'm going to make it happen. Now, I do like the idea of manifesting and all things like that, but like practically how that works is because I had allowed myself to dream of this shop. I knew what it would look like. I knew what it would feel like. And then when we saw this empty shop, I was like, oh my God, that is it. That's the one that's been in my dream. Not obviously the actual shop, but just the vibe I got from the shop. And then I pursued the landlord, who he did want to keep it as a retail unit because it had been a men's shop for like over 100 years. And round where we are, there's lots of like people want to start restaurants and bars, or they did. So he was having lots of interest from people that wanted to make it into like a pizza restaurant and then a bar and all stuff. So when we came along and said, no, we want to keep it as a shop, like a retail unit, he entertained us, if you like. He was like, oh, right, okay, well, you can come down and check the space out. And we went inside, and it was so old, and it was needed a lot of work. But I just was like a dog with a bone, and I just thought, no, this is what all those years have led up to. So I think if it wasn't for me stood around kind of thinking, right, where can I take this seed of an idea? How can this grow? What will this look like in the future? That kind of fed into what was then my current situation. And I think, and now 3 years on, 2.5 years on, we've had the shop, albeit COVID has kind of put a kibosh on those plans for now. But what I'm trying to say is I allowed myself to dream. Those dreams then took me to seeing the potential of something right in front of me. And if it wasn't for the shop, I think Acorn and Pip would look really differently now. Having a retail store on the high street has really propelled us forward. There's a lot of competition in our industry. So in kids wear, children's shops, independent children's shops, it's quite saturated. But we've been able to our USP has really allowed us to stand out a little bit and stand apart a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of a mixture of like our journey and kind of my belief in being able to dream.
Yeah, I think that's really captured the power of dreaming, and I think it's so important because, like you said, you didn't just dream this and it happened straight away. And sometimes I think it can be quite like you want things to happen now and you want them to happen straight away, but that's not always feasible or possible. But having a dream and continuing to dream, eventually it will click.
Yeah, because what I'd dreamt for Acorn and Pip, so I knew I wanted it to be this, what it is now. So like a shop with a cafe inside, a real community hub, a space where people can come and meet and reconnect over coffee and cake, and also have a lovely shop to sit in as well. And we have a play area. So this whole idea was from the start what I knew Acorn and Pip could become. But then the idea, that was like the 5-year plan. So we did it before the 5 years, but that was our vision for our 5-year plan. But what we did in the meantime was, start up the e-com store. We was trading at the market. We were growing our customer base so that when we knew that we were going to go into a physical space, we would have the customers there to be able to support us. So we were chipping away at that 5-year plan over the course of those years, with this really clear dream in mind, dream or vision, whichever one you want to kind of use.
Yeah, I think it's just fantastic, and it's it is inspiring, and it's quite good to hear in this time where there aren't as many like good stories on the news and inspiring things to really easily consume. And I think hearing about your story, the kind of perseverance and commitment you've had to your business, and just the way you think about like life is really nice to hear.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about how we see business not as a job, and me and her were just kind of ruminating, I suppose, just like how much we love our businesses. And I've done some work in the past with Lucy Sheridan, the comparison coach, and we were looking at how we talk about ourselves in our business. And she did a really amazing task of like, you give your business a voice. So mine's a she, so like give her a personality, give her a voice. How do you talk to your business? And it was a really interesting activity where, like, by the end of it, I came away with like this really this real appreciation for my business. Like, I sit down with her every day, I log on, we get through all these tasks, we we come across loads of challenges, but we get through it together. And it sounds really kind of woo, but once you sit down and like appreciate how hard your business works and how hard you work for it, I came away from that exercise feeling really positive and like connected with my business, and like we're best friends. You know, we've been doing this for 5 years, me and her. Like we work really hard, and I think she's ace. And it was like one of those activities. I was like, what am I doing? Like my business is talking back to me. This is really weird. But I sort of, and this was in lockdown, so maybe I had hit like peak madness level. I'm not sure, but like I came away from it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like I can talk to my business. I can say, well done. Like, well done for generating this much money. Well done for pushing your limits. Well done for growing this much this year. And it's just kind of looking at your business really positively, because I think some people like, and I mean, I've had this before, you go to work on Monday morning, you just think, oh my God, I hate this job so much. This is really hard. Or on a Sunday night and you sit there and go like, I don't want to go into work tomorrow. Like those situations, they're really hard situations. You have to be like really, really strong to overcome that Sunday night dread. I've been in it so many times before. But then trying to find a position, like a position as in a job position, where you can really admire that work that you're doing, cutting yourself a shitload of slack and just being like, do you know what? I show up every day. My business shows up every day. I'm really grateful to be able to do this. Like I really like working. So it's taken me quite a long time to kind of put that positive spin on working. So when I was in recruitment or as a teacher, it was a drag. It was hard. And I didn't get a lot back from it. But what I've tried to do in running my own business is seeing it as like this really positive thing that I'm doing. You know, I'm not changing the world. I am well aware of that. But this is my life. You know, like I work. This is my job, my life. If I don't enjoy it, I'm going to be a right grump with the kids, with my husband. I'm just going to be a massive grump. So it's like, right, how do I make this job a really positive thing in my life? And that is a mindset thing. Like you have to like work on your mindset. So I've probably come across that I'm absolutely off my rocker. Everyone has their way of coping. No, everyone has their way of, you know, approaching life. And I think if you try to do it really positively, then that's the kind of path that you will go down. And that's definitely how I have approached having my own business, because it can be incredibly stressful at times. But I think kind of really, really looking at what you're doing, who you're doing business with, and how that makes you feel is really important to like how that plays out in the rest of your life, like relationships and family and all things like that. So I just try to do it really positively.
Honestly, you're not coming off your rocker at all. Like you can't see it, but I'm like here smiling and nodding loads. I'm like,
you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, who have I got on this show today?
No, but it's actually something that I'm like, I'm gonna have to go away and do. Because one thing I was thinking of it while you were talking about it was, I find it very difficult to sort of like congratulate myself for achieving things in business.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of like giving my business a personality and like a person, that will help me so much to actually be like, actually it's done pretty well, you know.
And I think so. Say you someone incredible that you've had your eye on for years, that you've really wanted to interview, and then suddenly they say yes, and instead of going like, oh my God, they've said yes to me, like, are they sure? Is it, you know, you should look at that and be like, my business has just done so well. Like they have recognized my business. They want to be a part of it. Good on you. You know, and it's just that way of, if you can't take compliments, or you can't have those dialogues with yourself, because you might have like a really strong inner critic, or you might be quite dismissive of yourself, or, you know, whatever it is, just being able to kind of pass that over to your business instead of you, it might land differently. And the more positive energy you can get into your life, well, like, that's really good. You know, we need all the positivity we can at the moment. But I think just looking at it in that way, it can be really empowering.
That is fantastic. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. And just to finish up now, because we're coming towards the end of the podcast, I ask everyone the sort of same question as we end, which is, life is quite tough. And sometimes it seems like now it's a lot tougher than you thought it would be. And what would you sort of say to anyone who right now they don't feel like it gets better? They just feel really like lost. They don't know what they're doing. What would you say to that person?
I'd say it does get better. Maybe not as quickly as your plan wanted it to. But Mike Tyson extremely famously said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And sometimes, especially in this last year, I think we've all been punched in the face quite a lot. But let your plans open up. Like, don't hold on to them too tight. You can be in charge of them and not in control of them. And give yourself a break. I know as a female, we have like quite high expectations put on our shoulders, and I say that as a female. I'm not sure. I'm not a man, so I can't speak for them. But I've always felt like we kind of have to be this kind of